All right, so these are exponential story problems. Essential question, how do you decide if a story problem represents exponential decay or exponential growth? So our only main idea is story problems for today, so write that in the left-hand column. So here are the two models for growth and decay. So growth is this, y equals a, parentheses 1 plus r raised to the t power. Decay is y equals a times parentheses 1 minus r raised to the t power. So the a, the little a in front, represents the initial amount or the starting amount, so whatever we're talking about. The r in both of these is the percent expressed as a decimal. So remember, you take the percent and you move it 2 decimals to the left to turn it into a decimal. And then t is always in years. It's the time in years. So if they give you something in months, then you have to convert that into years. Now, these will be given to you, the equations, but not what everything represents inside. So it will be on you to make sure that you understand what goes for A, what you plug in for R, and what you plug in for T. Okay, and Y is what you get when you plug all that in. That's your final answer. Okay, so example 1. In 1996, there were 2,573 computer viruses and other computer security incidents. During the next 7 years, the number of incidents increased by about 92% each year. So part A, we have to write an equation to represent the situation, and B, we have to figure out how many incidents were there in 2003. Okay, so first let's identify if we're using exponential growth or decay. So since it says that the number of incidents increased, then we're using the growth model. We're going to use this one. Okay, so we go through the variables. A represents the starting amount. So the starting amount of incidents was 2,573. The rate was 92%. So remember the decimals here. So you move it 2 to the left. So that would be 0.92. And then your t, we don't know yet. It's just saying that over the next 7 years, this happened. But for the first part, when we do part A, we're just writing the equation, leaving t and y in your equation. So now I'm just going to plug in and get y equals, plug in the a value. So this is just your generic equation that we're going to use for part B. And then it's 1 plus the r value, which is 0.92, and raised to the t power. So again, this 7 up here is not telling us to plug in for part A. They're just saying that this rate went on for 7 years. Okay, so part A is finished. So whenever they just ask you to write the equation to represent the situation, the y and the t need to be in your equation. So all you're plugging in is the a value and the r value. Now another way you could have written this was this. If you want to go ahead and add this and get 1.92 raised to the t power, that also works. I would take both of those answers. Okay, so part B now wants us to figure out how many incidents were there in 2003. So from 1996 to 2003, how many years have elapsed? 7. All right, so now I'm going to use this equation we got on part A and plug in 7 for the t. Okay, so go ahead and type that into your calculator as you see it. To the 7th. Oops. And we get approximately, so I'm putting the squiggle because we are rounding, 247,484. Now this problem does not make sense to give me decimal answers because we're saying how many incidents, security incidents there were. Okay, so even though it's 0.7, we still don't round this up to 485 because of the 0.7, because we're not quite to a whole number. And so when we're talking about real world stuff, we don't need to round. Okay, but you do need to label it. So this one would be incidents. So part B would be worth 2 points because you're showing me what you plugged into your equation that you got and then your answer with that label. Okay. All right, let's try the next one. So you try the next one. Go ahead and pause and then turn it back on to check. Okay, so this is decreasing. So you should have used decay. So the 1 minus r to the t. So for part A, the initial amount was $4,200 that you paid for the snowmobile. Then 1 minus 10% as a decimal is 0.10. And then remember, when you're writing the equation, the y and the t are still intact. Okay? Or another way you could have written it if you wanted to just simplify it up a little bit, 1 minus 0.10 would be 0.9. I'd take either one of those. Okay? All right, now part B, we actually want to estimate how much it is after 3 years. So use that equation you had, and then we plug in 3 for 3 years. Okay? Now this one is involving money, so decimals make sense. So make sure that we will do 2 decimal places because that's what makes sense for this problem. So then that's going to be, y is going to be approximately, this is in dollars, so you need the dollar sign, that's your label, $3,061.80. Now your calculator is just going to tell you 0.8, but since this is money, you need to have 2 decimal places, so you have to do that 0 placeholder. Okay? So that's a decay because it was decreasing. The last thing we need to talk about is compound interest. So compound interest is something that banks do when you invest money in the different accounts that they offer. So here's the formula. So the formula will be given to you, but not what all of the pieces of the formula mean. So you will need to study that for the tests and the quiz. Okay? So that capital A that's all by itself on one side, that's the ending amount in the account when you're done. The capital P is like the little a, and these other ones is what you start with. So the amount of money that you invest, which we call the principal. Rate is still R as a decimal. Now N is a new thing that we're adding in here. It's the number of times that it gets compounded per year. Okay, we'll talk about that in just a second. And T is the number of years, so it's still in years. So these are commonly times that they compound it. So if they just say they compound it yearly, then N is just equal to 1 because they do it once a year. If they say they compound it quarterly, that means they compound it 4 times a year. And I remember quarterly because it's 4 because there's 4 quarters in a dollar. Monthly is just the number of months there are in a year, which is 12, so N equals 12. Weekly, there are 52 weeks in a year, so N is 52 if they compound it weekly. And daily, 365 days in a year, assuming it's not a like leap year. So we'll just use 365 for ours, which is how many days there are in a year. Another one that they might do that you want to add is if they say semi-annually, that means that they do it twice a year. So that means N would equal 2. Semi means half, so they would do it halfway through and at the end. Okay? So again, the formula will be given to you, but not what all the pieces are. So example 3, you deposit $4,000 in an account that pays 2.92% annual interest. Find the balance after 1 year if the interest is compounded with the given frequency. So we've got 3 different frequencies that we'll use. Okay, but for this one, all A, B, and C principal is the same. We're investing $4,000. The R is the same for all three of these. So if I were to take 2.92 and move the decimal twice to the left, with the 0 there, so 0.0292. And our T for all of these are going to be 1 year, because that's what it gave us in the problem. All right, so the thing that's going to change, because this is the formula we're using, and you know this is the one and not just the regular one that we did earlier, because it said compounded. As soon as it says compounded, weekly, monthly, quarterly, daily, whatever, you're using this formula. Okay? So for part A, quarterly, what was quarterly? N equals 4. Okay, so now I'm going to plug in everything. So A is going to be 4,000, and then 1 plus 0.0292 divided by 4 to the 4 times 1 power, because we're just doing 1 year for this one. Okay, so go ahead and type that into your calculator. Okay, and you should get approximately $4,118.08. Now it was 0.085, but banks are greedy and they're not going to round up for you, so you just cut it off at the cents. Okay. All right, so you try part B and part C. So part B says it's going daily. So remember that means N is 365. And part C, monthly, N equals 12 because there's 12 months in a year. So you try those, plug those in, and then pause, work those out, and then unpause to check. All right, so on part B, you should have gotten approximately $4,118.51. And this is what you should have plugged in to get that. And then on part C, you should have plugged in this, and you would get approximately $4,118.37. So notice, just because you're just in 1 year with the same rate and the same principal, just changing when it's compounded. This one, it was compounded the least amount of times each year, so you have slightly less money than the one on part B where it's compounded 365 times a year. You get a little more money. Now it is just in the change, really. Okay. All right. So exit slip. You try this one. So pause it, see if you can get this answer, and then unpause it to check. All right. So for the exit slip here, we're going to have A equals your principal amount, 500. 1 plus your rate, 3%, is 0.03, divided by N, which it says it's compounded weekly. So that's N equals 52. So divide by 52, all raised to the 52 times T, which it says find the balance after 5 years. So T is 5. Okay, so this is what you're typing in. And when you do that, you get A is approximately $580.89. Okay, so do a repetition and then work on your worksheet.